My name is Daniel Reyes. I've survived storms, rescues, and things that should have killed me, but nothing terrified me like what I met on that mountain. The wind hit me so hard it felt like a hand trying to shove me back down the mountain. My flashlight shook in my grip, its beam slicing through the storm in jagged bursts of light. I heard someone shouting over the roaring blizzard, panicked, breathless, the kind of shout that makes your instincts curl tight. "Here, over here, you need to see this." I forced my legs forward. The snow swallowed my boots to the ankles. My lungs burned from the cold, each breath like inhaling knives. When I reached him, the rescuer was staring down at the collapsed tent with an expression I'd never seen on his face before, not in all the searches we'd done together. Fear. Real fear. The canvas was torn open in long violent slashes. But not from the outside. From the inside. I crouched beside him, pressing a hand against the shredded fabric. The cold had turned the edges stiff, the cuts ragged, desperate. Whoever sliced through this tent hadn't been thinking. They hadn't been careful. They had just wanted out. "They cut themselves free," I whispered. He nodded slowly, his jaw clenched so tight I saw a muscle jumping along his cheek. "They ripped it open with knives. Or hands. I don't even know." I leaned into the tent, my light washing over a scene that twisted my stomach. Clothing half buried in snow. Journals scattered open. Boots left behind. Food set aside as if someone had been preparing a late meal. Everything abandoned in an instant. "What could make 9 experienced hikers sprint out of here without shoes?" he muttered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth, at that moment, was that I didn't believe anything normal was responsible. I felt it the second we arrived. A weight in the air. A pressure behind the silence. The kind of feeling you get when you know you're not alone. We moved down the slope, pushing against the screaming wind, until our flashlights found what we dreaded and expected all at once. Footprints. Not running. Not stumbling. Walking. Single file. Calm. Bare. I crouched, brushing snow off one of the prints with my glove. "They walked," I said quietly, almost to myself. "In a storm like this. Barefoot." The rescuer swallowed hard. Something scared them out of that tent. But something else kept them walking. I followed the trail with my flashlight, the prints weaving straight into the blackness of the forest below. I could barely hear my own voice over the storm. What were they following? He didn't respond. No one could. We moved carefully, tracking the prints as the storm raged. Time bent strangely in cold like this. Minutes felt like hours. My face stung. My fingers ached even through gloves. And yet all I could think about was how much worse the hikers must have suffered. Then I saw it. A shape half buried in the snow. I rushed toward it, dropping to my knees as I brushed away the icy crust. A pale arm emerged. Then the outline of a neck. A frozen face, mouth parted slightly, eyes closed as if he'd simply fallen asleep in the wrong world. Yuri Doroshenko. Only in underwear. Barefoot. His skin was gray-blue. His fingers curled like he'd been reaching for something in the end. My breath trembled. Oh God. Another rescuer moved beside me. "There's another. Here." He pointed to a second body lying face down in the snow, only a few feet from Yuri. Georgy Kravonishenko. Both of them half naked in the brutal cold. This wasn't hypothermia stripping. It hadn't gone on long enough. This was terror. Panic. A desperate flight. Something else unsettled me even more. Above us stood a massive cedar tree. Its bark was torn off in long streaks. Branches snapped. Splinters everywhere. As if someone had climbed it in pure, blind fear. Or as if something down below had driven them upward. "What happened to them?" a rescuer whispered behind me. "I don't know," I said. But the truth was clawing at my throat. Nothing natural could have forced them into this. The wind howled around us, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely scared of the dark. I stood slowly, my flashlight trembling as I continued scanning the tree. "Do you see that?" someone said. "Blood. On the bark." I didn't want to see it, but I did. Little flecks of red frozen in place, mixed with torn skin. Someone had clawed their way up that tree with bare hands. I imagined the pain, the desperation, the horror behind each gouge in the bark. Why? What had they seen? I forced myself to step away, to steady my breathing. We marked the bodies and continued forward into the forest. The wind softened slightly as the trees shielded us, but the silence that replaced it was somehow worse. Deeper, thicker. It felt unnatural, as if the forest was holding its breath. We found the next 3 bodies on a shallow path leading back toward the tent. Rustam, Zina, Igor. I froze when I saw Igor's hand stretched forward in the snow, fingers curled like he'd been reaching for something he knew he'd never get back to. Like the tent was a beacon he was desperate to return to. They had been trying to crawl home. My chest tightened. These were strong hikers. Trained. Brilliant. They shouldn't have died like this. Not crawling. Not freezing. Not lost in the dark. I knelt next to Igor, brushing frost off his face. His expression was peaceful, as if whatever horror he'd faced had ended long before the cold took him. I touched his shoulder gently, as if he might still feel it. "We'll find out what happened to you," I whispered. "I swear." One of the rescuers called to me from deeper in the woods. "Sir, we found something else." His voice carried a tremor I didn't like. "More footprints." I called back. "No," he said, and even from a distance, the fear in his voice sent a ripple through me. "More bodies." I stood, my legs heavy, my throat tight. Something inside me already knew these wouldn't be like the others. Something deep in my gut told me that whatever we were about to find would change everything. I didn't know then that I was right, and that what waited in the ravine ahead would haunt me for the rest of my life. I pushed through the undergrowth as fast as the snow allowed, the beam of my flashlight slashing between the trees. The rescuer's voice guided me, shaken, uneven, too thin for a grown man. When I reached him, he was standing on the edge of a drop, staring down into a ravine lit only by our jittering lights. "Down there," he whispered. At first I saw nothing, just snow, rocks, and darkness pooling in the hollow like ink. Then my eyes adjusted, and shapes began to form. Shapes that shouldn't have been human in the positions they were in. Bodies. 4 of them. All partially buried by snow, limbs twisted unnaturally, as if they'd fallen from a great height or been thrown with impossible force. My mouth went dry. I slid down the slope, half slipping, half desperate to reach the closest body. I brushed snow from the face, and the breath left my lungs in a sharp gasp. It was Ludmilla. She lay with her arms curled near her chest, but something about her face was wrong. I blinked, leaned closer. Her eyes were missing, empty hollows staring back at me. Her tongue was gone. Her lips were torn in jagged shapes that didn't match the cold's usual bite. The rescuer who followed me down knelt beside her and whispered a curse under his breath. "Animals," he said, but even he didn't believe it. "No animal does that," I murmured. "Not in this pattern. Not in this cold. And not selectively." The rest of her body was untouched. I moved to the next hiker, Semyon. His skull was crushed on one side. But what stopped me cold was that the skin wasn't broken. It looked like someone had taken a sledgehammer to his head, but from the inside. No blood. No external wounds. Just catastrophic internal damage. I felt the world tilt in a way that made my stomach twist. I'd seen hypothermia, avalanche victims, animal attacks. Nothing looked like this. I checked the next 2, Alexander and Nikolai. Both with ribs shattered inward. Not outward. No marks on their skin. No bruises that matched the bone trauma. Their chests had collapsed as though the weight of a truck had pressed straight through them. Except there were no tracks. No avalanche signs. No disturbance around the bodies. I stood slowly, snow sliding off my coat. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The air felt too heavy to breathe. "Whatever happened here," one rescuer whispered, "they didn't die from the cold." "No," I said quietly. "Something killed them before the cold ever had the chance." I walked back to Ludmilla, staring at the hollows where her eyes had once been. I couldn't stop wondering what she had seen in her final moments. What had terrified her so deeply that she bit through her own tongue trying to scream? Or had it been ripped out? I didn't want to know the answer, but at the same time, I needed to. We bagged what we could, marked the site, and began climbing back up the ravine. Every step felt heavier, like the mountain itself was trying to hold us in place. Night was fully settled by the time we regrouped near the tent. Some rescuers stood silently, their eyes on the tree line. Others stared at the tent like it might suddenly come alive and slash itself open again. One of the younger men stepped toward me. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Sir, I'm scared." I didn't blame him. I felt a fear gnawing at my spine too, quiet, constant, growing. "We'll get answers," I said, though I barely believed my own words. I sat inside what remained of the tent, brushing frost off a handful of the hikers' scattered journals. The wind rattled the flaps like fingers tapping on a coffin lid. In the dim light, I flipped through Igor's entries, pages full of jokes, plans, optimism. Nothing that hinted at fear. Then I found a page dated their last night. A page half written, a sentence trailing off. It sounds like, the rest of the sentence was a jagged line across the paper, as though the pen had been ripped from his hand. I shut the journal, a shiver crawling slowly down my spine. Behind me, a rescuer shouted, "Lights! Out there, look!" I lunged out of the tent. The sky above the tree line was lit by faint, floating orbs, pale, wavering, like lanterns drifting far too high. They flickered, moved, then vanished. Someone whispered, "What was that?" "Probably stars," another said, though none of us believed it. I stared into the darkness, my pulse thudding. I'd seen reports in the village. Some of the locals claimed they'd seen strange lights in the sky the night the hikers died. They called them fire circles. At the time, we'd brushed it off. Now, I wasn't so sure. My radio crackled suddenly, making me jump. A voice from base. "Storm's worsening. Pull back for the night. Repeat, pull back." I looked once more at the tree line, the ravine, the torn tent. "I'm not leaving them alone here," I muttered. But the others were already packing up. Exhaustion, fear, cold, they were crashing down on us. And the storm wasn't giving us mercy. It never did. As we trekked back, I kept glancing over my shoulder. At one point, I stopped. I swore I heard footsteps behind us. Soft, crunching footsteps in the snow. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. One rescuer shook his head. "Just the storm." But it wasn't the storm. I knew what storms sounded like. This was something heavier, more deliberate. When I turned fully around, the forest behind us was a maze of shadows. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No shapes. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. When we reached the base cabin, I sat alone by the fire, unable to shake what I'd seen. The bodies in the ravine. The missing eyes. The crushed ribs. The footprints walking into oblivion. The slashed tent. Something had chased them out of that shelter. Something had hunted them through the dark. Something had crushed bone without breaking skin. Something had torn eyes from sockets without leaving claw marks. Something unnatural. Something none of us were prepared to face. Long after everyone else fell asleep, I sat with the journals, turning pages with trembling fingers. I read their laughter, their optimism, their last meal, their last jokes, and I felt like I was reading ghosts. When I finally closed my eyes, I still heard it. Faint, far away, a low hum, vibrating through the floor, through the walls, through my bones, like something huge was moving beneath the mountain. I didn't sleep, not that night, not for many nights after. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the air felt heavier, like the mountain was holding its breath. I stepped outside before the others woke, letting the icy air stab at my lungs. I needed clarity, Needed something to ground me after the sleepless night filled with that humming vibration that still seemed to echo inside my skull. Snow stretched endlessly around us, sparkling in the early sun, or pretending to. I kept staring at the tree line, waiting for something to move, to reveal itself, but the forest stood in absolute stillness. Then behind me, boots crunched. It was Oleg, the team medic, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. "You didn't sleep either," he said. "No." He lit a cigarette with trembling hands. "I had dreams," he muttered, exhaling a shaky breath. "But not dreams. More like memories that aren't mine." I stared at him sharply. "What did you see?" He took a long drag before answering. "A blinding light. White. Too white. It was like it was pressing into me, through me. Like it was angry I was there." My skin crawled. "Did you hear anything? A humming sound?" He froze. Slowly, he nodded. "Yes. Exactly that. Like a generator running underground. But deeper." I swallowed hard. That sound had been real, then. Not a dream. Not exhaustion. Before I could ask more, the cabin door opened and our unit leader stepped out. "We're heading back up," he said. "We still need to find the remaining bodies." I hated that he used the word bodies, as if they were mere objects left on the mountain. But I nodded and followed him. The others fell in line behind us, each wearing the same expression, determination barely masking fear. We climbed back toward the ravine. The closer we got, the more my breathing tightened. The air felt wrong here, heavier than it had been an hour earlier, as if something unseen had settled over the site. When we reached the tent again, I stopped dead. Tracks. Fresh ones. Not ours. They circled the tent in a wide loop, deep impressions, too deep for any human to make. The stride was long. Too long. Maybe twice the length of a normal step. Whatever had made them walked with a purpose. Oleg whispered, "Those weren't here yesterday." "No," I said softly. "They weren't." The leader crouched down to examine the tracks, his jaw tightening. "Could be wolves." "These are not wolf prints," I snapped. "Look at the spacing. Look at the depth. And where are the claw marks?" The prints were smooth. Perfectly smooth. No toes. No pads. No claws. Just depressions, oval-shaped, as if something heavy and round had pressed into the snow. The leader stood slowly. "Keep alert." We moved carefully through the trees toward the area we hadn't searched yet. The silence was suffocating. Even the wind refused to make a sound. It felt like the entire forest was listening to us. 10 minutes later, we found the next group. 3 more hikers, half buried under a thin crust of snow. Rustam, Yuri, Zina, Ida. I kneeled beside Rustam and pushed snow away from his face. His expression was frozen in a look of pure terror, eyes wide, lips parted slightly, as if he had died mid-scream. His fists were clenched so tightly that his fingernails had pierced his skin. Zina lay a few meters away, her body twisted in an unnatural position, one arm broken cleanly at the elbow. But there were no bruises, no blood, just a break that looked almost surgical. Yuri's skull had caved in the same way Semyon's had. No external trauma, just a collapse from within. One of the rescuers gagged and stumbled backward. "What is doing this?" he whispered. I shook my head, unable to form words. But then something else drew my attention, Rustam's jacket. It had been torn, but not by claws, not by knives. The fibers were split cleanly, almost melted at the edges. And inside his jacket, pressed against his chest, was a scrap of paper. My heart pounded as I gently pried it out. The writing was scrawled, frantic, barely legible. "It's coming. We can't escape. It sees everything. Don't look directly at." The rest of the ink trailed off into a smear. Oleg hovered beside me. "What does it say?" I handed it to him silently. He read it, swallowed hard, then tucked it carefully into his pocket like a sacred object. We were no longer dealing with the mountain. We were dealing with something else. The leader radioed the base, his voice shaking despite his attempt to sound calm. "We've located 3 more. Same, same type of injuries. There was static, then the operator's voice, strained. Pull back. Immediately. What? Why? Because something's happening in the sky, the operator said. We're seeing. The radio cut out. A high-pitched whine sliced through the air, sharp enough to make me drop to my knees, hands clamped over my ears. The others did the same, groaning in pain. The sound vibrated through the trees, through the snow, through my bones. And then it stopped as suddenly as it began. I staggered to my feet. Everyone okay? No one answered right away. Several were still shaking. Oleg looked pale, sweat dripping down his temple despite the cold. What was that? He whispered. I don't know, I said. And it was the truth. I had no idea. But whatever it wasn't wind. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't anything I'd ever heard in my life. Then, from the direction of the ravine, a faint echo drifted on the cold air. A scream. My blood ran cold. It wasn't an animal scream. Not wind shrieking through cracks. It was human. Clear. Terrified. But we had already found 7 bodies. That meant someone was still alive. I heard it. Oleg shouted. It came from the ravine. I didn't think. I just ran. Snow sprayed behind me as I sprinted toward the sound, slipping, stumbling, pushing harder. The others chased after me, yelling for me to slow down, to wait. But I couldn't. If someone was alive down there, we had to get to them. When I reached the ravine's edge, the world fell silent again. I scanned the slopes, the trees, the untouched snow. Hello? I yelled. We're here to help. No answer. Just my breath fogging in front of me. Then something moved at the bottom of the ravine. A flicker. A blur. A shadow. I leaned forward, squinting through the glare. And my heart stopped. Something was standing there. Not a person. Not an animal. Something tall. Too tall. A silhouette with no defined edges. As if its shape were shimmering. Flickering. Existing and not existing at the same time. It turned, slowly, like it could sense me watching. I stumbled backward, my boots sliding dangerously close to the edge. The thing lifted its head. Or what I assumed was its head. And then, it vanished. Like it had never been there at all. I stared at the empty space where the figure had stood, my breath caught somewhere high in my throat. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the air, settling softly where that thing had been only seconds before. My mind tried to piece together what I'd seen, but the memory slipped like water through my fingers, distorted, incomplete, impossible. Footsteps crunched wildly behind me. Where is it? What did you see? Oleg shouted, sliding to my side so fast he nearly toppled over the edge. I pointed, my arm trembling. There was something standing right there. The leader caught up with us, chest heaving. A person? One of the hikers? No, I whispered. Not a person. He looked at me, confusion fracturing into irritation. What the hell does that mean? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because even saying it aloud felt like acknowledging something I wasn't prepared to face. Instead, I pointed down toward the ravine floor. Someone screamed. It came from down there. The leader scanned the area, jaw clenched, before signaling the others. We're going down. Carefully. We descended slowly, roping ourselves to nearby trees. The snow was looser here, the ground uneven, and every step felt like a gamble against the mountain. As we crept lower, the air grew colder, not naturally colder, but sharply, unnaturally cold. Like walking into a freezer with the door left open. As soon as my boots hit the bottom, I felt it. Pressure. Everywhere. An invisible weight pressing against my chest, my skull, my spine. I gasped and steadied myself against a rock wall. You feel that too? Oleg asked, voice quivering. Everyone nodded. The leader motioned forward. Spread out. Look for tracks. I moved toward the cluster of pine trees at the ravine's bottom, the ones whose branches sagged under the weight of snow. The world felt muffled here, sound swallowed by the icy air. I was scanning a fallen log when I heard it, soft, faint, but unmistakable. A whisper. My name. It was so quiet I thought I imagined it. A trick of the wind, maybe. But then it came again, a little louder, drifting through the trees. Come, here. I spun around, heart punching against my ribs. Did you hear that? I called out. No one answered. They were too far behind, spaced out across the ravine. Come, please. The voice was weak, desperate. It sounded human. Hello? I called, my breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. I hear you. Keep talking. I pushed through a cluster of branches, snow dropping onto my shoulders. My boots crunched through untouched powder. Then I saw it. A piece of fabric, caught on the bark of a low-hanging branch. Blue, torn, fluttering lightly in the breeze. I knew the color instantly. Liuda's jacket. She was the last one missing. Liuda! I shouted, adrenaline firing through my veins. If you can hear me, shout. Silence. Then, a sob. Faint. Choked. It came from behind a snow-covered embankment. I sprinted, slipping on ice, my breath tearing at my throat. As I rounded the embankment, the sight before me made my blood freeze solid. Liuda lay curled on her side, half buried in a shallow pit carved into the snow, one arm stretched toward me. Her face was pale blue, her lips cracked, her eyelashes dusted with frost. But her eyes were open, and she was breathing. Barely. Oh my God, I whispered, dropping to my knees beside her. Liuda, I'm here. Her eyes flicked toward me, unfocused. Her lips trembled. Help me. I will. I promise. I cradled her head gently. We're going to get you out of here. Her skin was frigid, colder than anyone still alive should be. Her pulse fluttered so faintly under my fingertips that it barely felt real. I turned and screamed for the others. Over here. I found her. My voice echoed through the ravine. Oleg and the leader were the first to reach us. Oleg dropped his pack immediately and tore it open, pulling out blankets, warm packs, anything he could get his hands on. How the hell is she alive? He muttered, already wrapping her in thermal layers. Liuda's eyes flicked open again, rolling toward me. Her lips parted, just barely. It wasn't human, she whispered. My blood chilled. What wasn't? Liuda, what did you see? She blinked slowly, each movement painful. It came from the sky, like light, but wrong. She shuddered violently, her teeth chattering. Don't talk, Oleg said gently. Save your strength. But she shook her head weakly. No, you have to listen. We leaned closer. It was in our heads, she whispered. It spoke without speaking. It told us to leave, to run. But when we ran, it followed. Her voice cracked. She swallowed painfully. It didn't want us looking at it. My stomach twisted painfully. Why not? Her eyes filled with tears. Because then it sees you. Oleg glanced at me nervously. She's delirious. Hypothermia. Don't take what she says too seriously. But I could see the terror in her eyes. Terror too sharp, too fresh to be the product of hallucination. The leader stood suddenly, scanning the trees. We need to move. Now. He wasn't wrong. The sky above the ravine had dimmed slightly, dark clouds swirling unnaturally fast overhead. I hooked my arms under Liuda's shoulders. On 3, I said to Oleg. 1, 2. A sound split the air. A low-frequency rumble that vibrated through the snow, through the fabric of my clothes, through the marrow of my bones. Liuda's eyes widened with raw, animal fear. No, she rasped. It's here. The rumble grew deeper, louder. Trees quivered. Snow broke loose from branches, falling around us in soft, eerie waves. The leader shouted, "Move!" We lifted Liuda together and started climbing the slope. Every step felt harder than the last, as if the mountain itself were fighting us. Then, a sharp crack echoed from behind. I whipped my head around. Something was rising from the floor of the ravine. Not walking, not stepping, rising. Its shape flickered, tall, shifting like a mirage, dark at the edges and blinding at the center, like a tear in the air that the world couldn't quite decide how to interpret. Oleg let out a strangled gasp. What the hell? The thing tilted unpredictably, like gravity didn't apply to it. The rumbling intensified, vibrating through my skull until my vision blurred. Liuda screamed, a raw, agonized sound. "It sees us," she cried. "Don't look at it, don't look." But it was too late. I already had. And the moment my eyes met its shifting, impossible form, my mind shattered. The moment my eyes locked onto that thing, it felt like the world inverted. Not just around me, inside me. A violent burst of pressure slammed into my skull, like invisible hands were trying to pry my thoughts apart. I staggered, dropping to my knees, screaming without sound as my vision fractured into shards of white and black. Images flashed behind my eyes, memories that weren't mine. Mountains under a red sky. A blinding sphere hovering above frozen ground. Human shapes running through snow. Shadows stretching across the ice like living veins. And then a voice, not spoken, not heard, but embedded directly into the center of my mind. Leave. The word thundered inside me, shaking every nerve in my body. Leave this place. I clutched my head, gasping. The weight of the command felt like a physical blow. Hands grabbed my shoulders. Oleg, don't look at it, he shouted, yanking me backward. I blinked, the world snapping back in disorienting fragments. The ravine spun around me as the rumbling deepened again, vibrating the snow beneath my boots. Lyuda cried out in agony. The leader shouted orders that were lost to the storm of sound. Everything blurred. Oleg dragged me to my feet, half carrying, half shoving me up the slope. I stumbled, vision doubled. Every step felt like I was wading through wet concrete. But adrenaline kicked in, pure, primal survival instinct. We had to move. We had to get out. Behind us, the air crackled with a strange energy, like electricity arcing through invisible wires. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The temperature dropped so sharply that my breath crystallized the second it left my mouth. I dared a glance over my shoulder. The thing was spreading. Not physically, God, no, but its presence was. Like its very existence was warping the atmosphere, bending reality into an impossible shape. The edges of the world seemed to blur wherever it hovered. Lyuda was slung over the leader's back, her screams fading into weak, broken sobs. Oleg pushed me upward, his breaths ragged and terrified. Hurry, the leader shouted. It's gaining. My legs burned, lungs tearing at the cold air. Snow crumbled under my boots as we fought our way up the ravine wall. Every few steps, I felt the force behind us press harder, like gravity shifting to pull us backward. The rumbling grew worse, so loud now it felt like it was burrowing into my bones. And then, the voice came again. You should not have come. I nearly collapsed from the force of it, but Oleg shoved me forward. Move, he yelled. Don't listen to it. We reached the top of the ravine just as a wave of pressure slammed into us, knocking all three of us to the ground. I rolled onto my back, panting, my chest burning, mind swimming. The sky above us had changed. Clouds twisted into a vortex, a swirling tunnel of dark gray and pale blue, rotating slowly over the ravine as if the mountain itself was opening an eye. In the center of that vortex, right above where the creature hovered, was a faint glow. Not warm, not comforting, cold, sterile. Wrong, Lyuda whimpered. It's calling more, they always come in twos. The leader checked her pulse with trembling fingers. We're almost out. Hold on, Lyuda. Please. We stumbled back into the tree line, using the branches for support. My head throbbed violently with every heartbeat. The creature behind us shifted, its form blinking in and out of visibility, closer each time. Oleg whispered, it's following us. Don't stop, the leader snapped. Don't turn around. Run. So we ran. Branches whipped at my face. Snow sprayed under our boots. Every few steps I felt that presence behind us, pressing, searching, crawling through the air like a living shadow. I felt it in my spine, inside my skull, inside my thoughts. Leave, leave, leave. We broke through the last of the trees and sprinted toward the cabin, our only shelter. Smoke still curled faintly from the chimney from earlier. It looked so small, so fragile, so utterly insufficient against what was chasing us. But it was all we had. Go. Geo, the leader shouted. We practically fell through the cabin door, slamming it shut behind us. The leader dropped the bolt, then shoved a wooden table against it. Oleg collapsed beside Lyuda on the floor, checking her breathing. I stumbled backward until my spine hit the far wall. My ears rang. My vision pulsed. Every muscle shook with terror. Outside, the rumbling grew louder. The cabin walls vibrated. Dust drifted from the rafters. Oleg looked at me, eyes wide. Is it coming inside? The leader didn't answer. He pressed his hand against the door, feeling for pressure. The wood trembled beneath his palm, warping slightly, just slightly, like something was pushing through it from the other side. Lyuda's eyes opened weakly. She stared at the ceiling, tears sliding down her frozen cheeks. "You can't hide from it," she whispered. "It sees through everything." A crack splintered through the wooden door. We froze. A single, clean line split the surface from top to bottom. Snow dust seeped in through the crack as the wood bowed outward. "No," Oleg whispered. "No, no, no." The leader grabbed his rifle, useless, but instinctive. "Stay behind me." I crawled toward Lyuda, gripping her cold hand. "Stay with us. Don't close your eyes." She looked at me with such pain that I felt something tear inside my chest. "It didn't want to kill us," she whispered. "We looked at it. That was the mistake." The crack widened. Something dark pressed against it, like a shadow with weight. Then everything stopped. The rumbling ceased. The vibrations ended. The pressure vanished. Silence. Complete silence. I didn't breathe. None of us did. Slowly, the leader lowered his rifle. Oleg leaned forward, listening, eyes wide. Nothing. Just wind. Just the crackle of the dying fire. Just our shallow, uneven breaths. I swallowed. Did it leave? The leader stepped toward the door, placing his ear against it. Nothing. He exhaled slowly. "It's gone." We didn't move for almost a minute. Finally, Oleg slumped against the wall, covering his face with both hands. "I thought we were dead. I thought." A sound cut through his words. A small, sharp tap. On the window. My heart thudded once. Hard. The leader turned his head slowly. Tap, tap, tap. The taps weren't coming from the window. They were coming from inside my skull. A voice whispered through my mind, quiet, cold, unmistakable. "I can still see you." My breath stopped. The voice faded. But the presence didn't. It hadn't left. It had never left. And as I stood there in the flickering firelight, staring into the endless white, I understood the horrifying truth. Some forces don't need doors. Some forces don't need form. Some forces don't stop just because you run. The unknown force was still here. And it always would be.